because this is an informal start to a show. Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. Kind of start to the
should
show.
do a formal start to the show, like
all right, I'll wear a tux.
Singers and dancers and.
Well, wasn't I doing like a weird, like a shimmy shake in my chair at the start of our last one, or something like that?
You were, but I think I hurt myself doing the last one.
Yeah,
I bring you love.
Oh yeah, hey, anybody get that Simpsons reference? I hope. I pray.
That was one of.
Hello, everybody. Hi, everybody.
Classic one.
So one thing that you'll all realize as we get going on these things is that we like to give a few seconds at the beginning. Like some shows do a countdown. We just talk to one another during the countdown because
we do a count up.
We do a count up, baby. Can't stop, won't stop. Questions are pouring in already, so I mean, we'll see if we can get to all these things.
There should be questions. If there weren't questions, I'd be worried about people.
Yeah, yesterday was kind of interesting, but we're not going to get into that just yet. We'll do all that at sort of like the real opening. This is the soft open, which is where I get to say things like, "Hey, Brew, check out my fun shirt on this. It's not Friday. It's Fun Shirt Thursday. Can you see what that is?"
Yeah, let me check this out. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fun one, isn't it?
You got to be old to understand how freaking cool that shirt is.
I was humming the theme song before you popped into the room. I don't know if people remember the.
Could you?
They do that a bunch more times. Then it goes.
Are you talking Double Dragon 1 or Double Dragon 2?
I think that was 1. Do you remember 3? 3 was crazy. That was hard.
That's when they went Hollywood. No, I don't remember Dragon 3.
There were 4 main characters in the third one. There was like a dude who had claws. I think his name was Chin. And then there was I can't remember who the fourth one was. It was like a bruiser, I think. It was a hard game. Oof. Regular Nintendo games were way harder.
For some people.
I went back, so I feel like a lot of people in our age bracket may have done this, but like going back in college and replaying regular Nintendo games, like the fact that it wasn't easy to save your progress in those games. You had to like either find a save point in games that were 15, 20 hours long, or you just couldn't. So like Battletoads, that game is freaking impossible. We got to the gear level, which is like the 8th or 9th stage, and just, I don't know. We gave up. It was too damn hard. Also great music, though. And my last point before I let you say something is, do you remember the Battletoads pause music?
I'm not that young. See, Battletoads showed up, I want to say, like, by the time I was a senior in high school.
You're not that much older than me. Battletoads for the regular Nintendo, that was like 1990, I think.
Really?
You're not you were not a senior in high school. All right. We're Googling it. Battletoads NES. I think that's 1990.
Was that even a Nintendo game? I thought that was a Sega game.
Nah, dude. 1991 regular Nintendo. Confirmed by the Googles.
Oh, boy.
How that I was, so you were like, what, 11 or something like that?
I'm going to look up Battletoads. Also, there's a great documentary on video games, Dan, called Game Over. On Netflix.
I know I need to see it. My college roommate told me I need to watch that.
I got all fired up for no reason. There's scenes from the Nintendo World Championships, which I did participate in. I finished 7th.
Ooh.
In that.
Do you remember when emulators became really popular in the early 2000s?
No, what is that? See, I lost all my video game skill in like 1996.
So that was when you could turn a computer into an old video game console effectively. And then there became this like really weird international emulator community. And for a long time, I had the number 2 score in the world in Burger Time. That was pretty.
Okay, I believe this.
I was 100%.
Meteoric. Right, do you believe me that I am like a top 8 Tetris player in the world?
Yes, I believe that.
Okay, good.
I believe
I have no verification on that. That's totally fake news. But my score of 608,000, I've only seen like people can get like 999,099, whatever. Apparently that's possible. I don't know how they did it. That's insane. But yeah, now I got 608,000 once, and
It's pretty
I
good.
believe that there's an internet website somewhere that ranked the all-time scores somehow. I don't even know how they would do that.
Like,
but there's also a world championship in Portland that I'm going to get to at some point, because you don't lose your skill. It's like riding a bike. Like,
we're gonna have to do a whole show on just The Wizard, starring Fred Savage. When did that movie come out? Was that like
started in
91?
fall.
Yeah. Get your power glove off my girlfriend. It's probably an
That movie
all-timer.
did not age well. And what's his name? Is it
Power glove.
Bo Bridges?
Was that a Bo? Was that
which
who was
Bridges
like?
is it?
I don't remember.
And is that Bridges? Is that Bridges related to Jeff Bridges?
Yeah, they're all
The dude? They're all the same clan.
So those two are brothers, and or both.
It's the guy
Yeah,
from
Bo
Jerry
and Jeff.
Maguire. My word is as good as oak.
I think Lloyd was the dad, and then Bo and Jeff are brothers. I think our chat room.
Lloyd Bridges. Holy Lloyd Bridges.
Yeah, there's a Bridges contingent.
It's,
Matt says RC Pro-Am, by the way. That was also a crazy game where you were car racing with minis. That was wild.
That was a great game.
Diddy Kong Racing? Blake, that's later.
Yeah,
that's Diddy Kong didn't exist
young kids.
Nintendo.
Was that like in the Puff Diddy era?
I don't know. That was fun. Donkey Kong developed siblings. I think was Donkey Kong Country. Was that when that started? Right? Or Super Nintendo? In any event. All right, I guess we've populated the group now.
Corporate. But yeah, the World Championships had Rad Racer. You get 50 coins in Super Mario.
Ooh, man,
and then whatever you could blow out in Tetris, right? So it was like Tetris was the biggest part of that game, and the other parts was just to get to Tetris as fast as you could. Ooh. And that's what my love for Tetris grew.
You're a psychopath, because Tetris, I think, might be the most stressful video game ever created.
It's a great party game, man. When we were in college.
Oh, look, you got a compliment, by the way. I got to jump in. You got a looking good, man. You didn't catch the last one. The big reveal that Brew dropped like 30% of Brew.
We're doing percentiles.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm thin now, and I'm working out. In fact, I travel with my workout gear. Would you guys like to watch me work out during the entire show? I'll do it.
Do you strap that to a truck and drag it behind you on your way to the office?
With my teeth. Yeah. I'm training for strongman. Didn't you know?
That's a great thing to watch, man. That is great late night.
That was the glory era of ESPN too. So it's like one ESPN channel, and at 11 p.m. you got Roy Firestone, which I have the book you recommended, Dan.
It's on my shelf. He signed it.
Naturally.
Where the hell is that thing? But, my buddy of mine, I think, represented him, and
his show would come on. It would be like him, and then Jim Rome would come on after him, and then like dragging trucks with your teeth with like 11 p.m. programming schedule.
Oh, I think I can reach it. Was it this one?
I think so. I don't have you on screen.
Is it this guy? Up close, Roy Firestone?
Well, I gotta find where you're at. You're on stream. I have like only 732 tabs open.
Yeah, I sat down with him when I was trying to like figure out if I really wanted to go into broadcasting, and a friend of a friend of a friend like knew his attorney, and that's how I ended up getting coffee with Roy Firestone in Encino. It was a weird day.
None of that was surprising, and it was also hell funny.
Yeah, he was super nice though to just some random kid who was like, "Should I learn how to broadcast?" And he was like, "You got to learn how to interview." And I was like, "You're probably right."
He was big on the interview, huh? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is actually, and I am going to exercise here, folks. I'm sorry. I've not done my exercises, and all the nerves craps just come back, and it sucks.
All right, you guys are going to be watching Brew do little like motions throughout the show, but I think we can do it now. We like to give folks about 8, 9, 10
like that. You make it sound like I'm going to pull a tube in.
I don't know what you're gonna do over there. At some point, I gotta flip over to NBA tabs. Right now, I'm just looking at your face. All right, in 5, you want to give me my Wayne's World again? Good day, everyone. Welcome to a live edition of Fantasy NBA Today, a sports ethos presentation. If you're watching us on YouTube, hello. If you're listening to the podcast iteration that's coming just afterwards, I'll edit this sucker down and send it off into the world. I am at Dan Besbris on Twitter. That's also my name. I am joined by the big dog. We're doing this every Thursday this year. Aaron Bruski. What do I hear?
Arf, arf.
The big dog's in pain today. It's not good. That's not good at
I'm
all.
limping, man. Hey, this was a run, dude, and you know it. And
yeah,
shouts to everybody involved at Ethos. I mean, everybody just pushing. It was crazy. It is every year, but this year we did so much more stuff, and everybody was amazing. And there's no rest after the season starts. Like I had an extra beer, and that was like my celebration because I was like, we got to go. Wednesday's here, or that was Wednesday night was last night.
Yeah.
You look at all those games and everything, all your preseason expectations are just like put to the test on game one, and you got to figure out what's real and what's not. And it was exciting. I thought all of our guys did really well. The ones that we got behind this year, so that was good.
Yeah,
It's good to hear.
That's kind of actually where I wanted to start with you, because once the season starts, I know people always want to know, like, and a lot of folks are pretty good at deciphering each part of the Bruski 150 that ushered folks along the way. Last week on this show, we talked about how to use a list in a draft, but now it's about looking at a bunch of different things. Actually, at the same time, you're looking at the players that you, Brew, me, Dan, whoever are high on coming into the season and how they're doing at the front end. You're looking at what's happening among players that maybe aren't even drafted. Like, is there going to be that type of surprise? And Big Wednesday brought a handful of those. There's just so much to keep track of. So my job today, I guess, is to try to keep this train on the rails as best I can, but there's so many things. So I kind of want to start with, like, you personally. You're looking at your guys, you're looking at the league at large. I think we can sort of safely say it out in the free universe because they were in the draft guide, and the draft guide is now effectively like yesterday's news because the season's begun. Guys like Isaiah Hartenstein, you were very big on. Onyeka Okongwu, you were very big on. DeJounte Murray. And then on the other side, Isaiah Jackson had a slow game. So how do you process? I mean, there were a lot of really, like, you're like, oh yeah, sweet, like this worked on the first day type of stuff. But then there's other things going on. So how do you process that data as you move into the first few days of the year?
You're watching really close. Like I watched most of that Pacers game, and with specific focus on Isaiah Jackson, it was really interesting. Jalen Smith goes into foul trouble early, and in comes Isaiah Jackson, and there was frustration in Jalen Smith. I thought that very like, don't pull me out, like, that his position battle is with Isaiah Jackson. That was the sense that I got. So that was one takeaway. I was like, these guys are going to operate sort of on a seesaw here, at least early on, while Miles Turner's out, and then Terry is the guy that's taking Miles Turner's minutes. Goga's still in the picture. So I'm just kind of getting the feel for, like, all right, they're going to let these four guys roll. When Turner comes back, Terry probably goes out, or it gets a little bit more complicated. And then the next thing I'm looking for is, like, how does he look, physically? He looked fine in the minimal stuff that I saw during the preseason, and I really don't look at preseason as closely. Total aside, like, Portland looked like they'd never played basketball before when they played the Kings last week, and totally different team last night. And so you almost can just get fooled. If you were to try to weight what you see in the preseason, there's so many reasons why it's not valuable. You just got to be really careful with what you do, looking at players as far as their speed and their explosion and things like that. So Jackson, I'm watching him and I'm going, he more or less looks fine. I did think he kind of looked a little slow compared to where I thought he was at the end of last year. And I also thought that team looked like they were completely feeling themselves out. Like, none of them looked sharp. during that first half, and he was just kind of floating around. And I thought to myself, if this continues, he's going to have an empty stat line, which is kind of what he did. He was three boards, 3 points, and a block, and he didn't play much in the second half. And I thought to myself, I wonder if the fact he was floating played into that. And I also thought that the matchup with Kristaps Porzingis was not good for him. Like, he was able to be bullied by Porzingis, and then in some of the other opportunities that he would have had to have either blocked a shot or played better defense, he got a couple 3-pointers drilled in his eye, and then on a couple drives, he was just a hair short. So what does that mean? Like, as a coach and, trying to dole out playing time, he could have easily, Rick Carlisle, been sending him a message like, hey, you need to get a little bit tighter on these 3-point shooters. You're a half step short. I need you to be a little bit more aggressive here. These are just the random thoughts that are going through my mind watching this game, and then trying to figure out, is this real? And the good news with Isaiah Jackson is you're not going to see a precipitous fall off in things like steals and block rate. You're just not. And so as long as he's getting minutes, and as long as overall you're not looking at him and saying, oh man, that's a problem, like, he doesn't look good, he doesn't belong on the floor. Watching him play, I'm like, yeah, he's more answer than problem in Indy, and he's going to be there because of the fact that he could defend multiple positions, because of the fact that they're going to need his rim protection, they're going to need defense in general on the floor. So I'm not worried about his playing time. I think my expectation for him was that early, like the first third of the season, he might be in the 18-minute range. But that if anything worked in his favor, whether it be an injury ahead of him or a trade of Miles Turner, that he would just quickly rise up to like 23, 24, and then finish the season at like 27, 28, 29 minutes as things thinned out. And the last thing on Isaiah Jackson, he's a big D150 guy. I'm sure people want to hear about him, is his play with Tyrese Halliburton is actually really notable. Halliburton lives on the pick and roll. He lives on players like Jackson keeping the back defender sort of paralyzed due to the lob. So you saw a couple plays in that time yesterday where Halliburton just went all the way to the cup because Jackson held that back end defender down. And that's going to be a seesaw all year long. Halliburton's going to try to get to the cup. It's been a focus of his, but eventually as he gets to the cup, that back defender is going to slide over, and then you're just going to see dunk after dunk from Isaiah Jackson. And that will literally be a core part of their offense. So not worried about Jackson at all. There were several other, I almost kind of hoped we'd go game by game and just quickly hit thoughts on players that, did well, didn't do well. I don't know what direction you want to spin with it, but there was a lot.
It's almost too much. It's almost too much, like, to go game by game. But then, look, I want to talk to you about the other side of the coin too, because if we always look more closely at someone who maybe doesn't perform in the first game. It's a lot easier to just gloss over someone who does, but I feel like we also need to issue the warning to folks that that's also important. Figure out why someone was successful, and was it for the reasons that we thought they would be. Like, on my end, folks that listen to Fantasy NBA Today every day, they know that my 4 sort of biggest, like, I wanted to try to make sure I had my own guys in addition to everything that the world is talking about and everything in the B150. They know that I was really high on Kevin Durant, Kristaps Porzingis, Keldon Johnson, and Big Al. And so obviously I'm looking at Al Horford. I'm like, okay, Joel Embiid in game 1. That's a pretty easy one. Keldon Johnson, he was really good yesterday. I feel great about that. Durant, Porzingis actually played pretty well. Like, it's important to look at why was Keldon Johnson successful? Was it usage? Was it the fact that he's playing at a smaller position on the floor? How do you, Brew, assess guys that you were very high on who then did perform? So how do you handicap your successes in the first week? Because that's a thing we have to do too.
Honestly, it's sad. Our brains have a built-in negativity bias. So when I get the winning answer, and it happens for the reasons that they happen, I just file it as done. And I don't think about it ever again. I don't pat myself on the back, and I don't go, hey, yeah, that was a good thing you did there. I just am like, all right, what happened with Isaiah Jackson? And actually, I'm not even stressing on it. I don't know that I had a player that I was really stressing on. Maybe like downstream, like D'Anthony Milton, I wasn't thrilled with his open. you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I watched that and I was like, they let James Harden be James Harden, and it sucked. And I watched James Harden wave off Joel Embiid, and I watched Joel Embiid quit in that basketball game. I watched Joel Embiid basically say, "Oh, you want to make this a James Harden team? Okay, I'm not going to play at all." And watching that drama play out and sitting there thinking, I bet in Philly that they're going to be asking for the Maxey Melton backcourt by about midway through the season. And so in my mind, I'm going, even though Melton had a little lame stat line and didn't show up, I'm like, yeah, he's just going to do his Melton stuff and he'll just be back there in the 100 to 150 range. And, eventually he'll kick it into gear and, probably finish where we ranked him. But Bane was one that really caught my eye as I was walking home from PT and saw like Bane, crumbling to the ground without anybody, kind of touching him. And, people were like wondering, is he really super hurt? And then there was all this chatter about how bad he was playing. And I think it was like just random Twitter people, I did a quick search for Desmond Bane to figure out what the injury was. And it was just like a lot of New York Knicks fans, like wondering who the guy with crocodile arms that shot 22 times, why was he continuing to shoot? And he had cramps and he could barely stand. And I was laughing. I was like, this is a great buy low opportunity, for a guy that went in the 55 range, in most leagues. And, obviously we had him ranked very high. If you're a subscriber, you just go to the B150 and see how high that was. Thinking like somebody's going to get him for a top 75 player and he's going to be inside the top 20, eventually. And he's got the green light to shoot whatever he wants. And they need him to do that. So whenever this cramping issue that we saw a couple players deal with, it was actually Cam Johnson was another B150 guy, dealt with some cramps. I think these guys come into the season kind of like 50 to 75% in shape. And they're in the first week. Another important point, they're getting into shape this week. So you got to watch out for that. A lot of what you're going to see just isn't applicable because of that fact. Somebody that struggled, is going to get into shape within that first week. And then somebody who did really well, like Michael Carter Williams from like 5 years ago, it falls off the map after having a 30-10-10 game, So I don't know who else struck. I know the Houston situation was really interesting. Bruno Fernando.
I mean, we can we can roll right into that too because we got so many damn things to cover. So we're gonna have.
I was hoping we do a little like lightning round and just like I'll go like 5-second responses and we'll just hit it all.
I mean, we can try that. Was there anything else on the Pacers that caught your eye? Because I thought Jalen Smith looked really good in the second half of that.
Yeah, I was happy. I mean, we got a lot of Jalen Smith, and I had this sort of like clump of top 50 B150 guys that were going as far as 8, 9, and 10. And Jalen Smith was in that crew, and I kept kind of dropping him down a tiny bit within that crew of players. It was like Hartenstein, Jackson, Brandon Clark was in there. And I was dropping Jalen because the knee thing was, and when I say drop it, like barely dropping him, just sort of deprioritizing him within this group that I could count on it. I was scripting my drafts and going from 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, knowing these guys would be available. Yeah, he looked great. He looked physically imposing. I think that he's going to get his minutes, and there's really no questions there. As long as that knee holds up, I think he's going to hit his B150 mark. So that was great, and I thought Buddy Hield rebounding was a trend we saw last year. I think that's going to continue. I think he's going to be underrated and good until he gets traded somewhere, and then he struggles a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Play with LeBron, never see the ball again. I don't know.
I'll jump you to another team. What did you think of Orlando in game 1? What did you think of Mo Bamba playing a dozen minutes? It feels like he might be the odd man out there.
Well, they just paid him, so like that doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
But like Orlando's a bad franchise. I mean, they just kind of are, and so they make weird bad decisions. I think they're probably going to let Banchero just sort of do whatever he wants. He had the big game. Keep in mind, guys, this is against Detroit, so like that's about as easy as he gets. amazing dunk over Corey Joseph. That was just hilarious. And I
don't
didn't
you
have
start with Corey. You can't. No, you're not allowed to talk
no,
about
no, I
Corey
didn't. I
Joseph.
didn't. Did you see me say anything? I could have, and I didn't.
He
But
brought
it
it
was
up
hilarious.
anyway.
But there was no point to getting dunked on like that. It was like he wanted to get dunked on like that. At any rate, Banchero he's an isolation player. I just wonder how long his teammates are going to be cool with him dribbling the air out of the ball, and what does that look like when you get somebody like Cole Anthony back? Markel Fultz isn't back. Like you mentioned, Mo Bamba didn't play it practically at all. What are they doing? What is their identity, and how does this look when they're tanking? Is like my key questions for them. Does Jonathan Isaac get back on the floor? I think Bamba is not going to play that bad, or statistically in fantasy that bad. I mean, what are we even saying? He played 12 minutes?
12, yeah.
I don't know that that's a sample that we're going to look at. He's a guy that was really rocking and rolling last year, top 75 for a long stretch, top 50 for stretches. And if he can get back into 25 minutes per game, top 100, top 125, he can be a fine, low end player with upside. But I would give him like 3 games, 4 games. And if he's not bouncing out of that, then you can start in a shallow league looking at your options.
What did you think about Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, and Bojan Bogdanovic over on the Detroit side of that game?
I could see them relying on Bojan, for the first half of the season. And, Dwayne Casey loves himself some veterans. See that player that will not be named, previously that still gets minutes. I thought Jalen Duren getting, I know, right? Jalen Duren getting, time and producing isn't surprising in the sense that, like these young centers, there's a couple, that came into the league. You throw them in there, they're going to do things like rebound and block shots. That's, what they do. That's kind of the only thing they can do at this point in time. There's no reason for them not to play him unless he's just not, giving Dwayne Casey what he wants out of a rookie and playing hard and, yada, yada, yada. But roster wise, future wise, there's no reason he shouldn't be getting 20 minutes. And that makes him a viable low end center with upside, because if they really crank on him, he gets up to 25, 28 minutes. He's looking at possible mid-round value. This is a guy that wasn't drafted very much. So that was a huge find, I thought. And if you want to spin over to like Charlotte, Nick Richards, he got, the double-double there. So he seems to be taking the lead in the who's going to pick up, after, what's his name? Drawing a blank, so I haven't had enough coffee. It was the center in Charlotte.
Still there, or when he's done?
Yeah, he's still there. Yeah, Plumlee. Thank you. That guy.
Yeah.
He's so forgettable that I forgot his name.
Yeah, he's a placeholder.
He doesn't have a player image.
Let's see. Where are we bouncing to next? How about Chicago? How good can Io be after Zach LaVine comes back?
Well, Io, I kept rising him up the rankings, and Io last year was great. Like he stepped in and he did everything you would ask him to do, like defensively, offensively. Certain free throw shooting isn't great, but he's a high percentage field goal shooter. He's passing the ball well. He's defending. So like you're not expecting him to be a first round or an early round talent. You're hoping that you can get some mid round value out of him. And he was going at like 150 in drafts, even knowing that he was going to start do the Lonzo Ball thing. And I mean, the Zach LaVine knee thing was obvious a year ago.
Yikes.
He had no business being drafted where he was drafted this year. He had no business getting the $207 million that he got. Like if you can't make it through a regular season the way he couldn't make it through a regular season last year, what are you doing giving him that money? It's astonishing that these teams are so stuck on stars that they did that, and now they're stuck in this unenviable position of they know they got $209 million invested, so they've got to play the long game, and they're like, yeah, we're going to ease them in. They already got a guy, Lonzo Ball, that they can't play. You can't make this stuff up, and so here's Io just sitting there. He should not be available anywhere, by the way. Like it shouldn't take this show to get him on rosters and fantasy leagues, because even if both those guys come back, Levine and Ball, Ball obviously not coming back for a very long time, but like if they were to come back, I think this team likes Io enough to keep him on the floor 25 minutes per game when both of those guys are back, and then he would just shift a little less on the ball, a little bit more defense, become even more efficient, and still probably hang out at a top 150 rating in that scenario. But he's going to go better, and he's going to probably be a top 80, top 70 guy going forward for the foreseeable future, with or without Zach LaVine.
What did you make of the Brooklyn Nets getting steamrolled in their opener? I mean, obviously KD was great.
Everybody stop trying to make Ben Simmons a thing. I mean, like,
yeah, that was a pretty easy fade, I thought, on draft day, but still,
everybody's like, oh, he's playing great defense. Like, no, he's not, and he's tired, and he's just like nothing's going well for him.
Yeah, I mean, he hadn't played in like 2 years, it seems like.
There's that. Was he good when he was playing 2 years ago? And defensively, he had some great moments there, before all of this stuff, started piling up. But it wasn't like he was just like unassailably a top defensive guy in the league. He had a 3 to 6 month stretch where he was that guy. And even then, it was kind of debatable, was he at that level that everybody talks about him as? And so now he comes in with that reputation, and he's nowhere near delivering on it. And even the comments from his teammates seem to suggest that it's not, they're not buying into Ben Simmons. So I think that this thing's got train wreck written all over it. As a fantasy GM, you're hoping that the train stays on the track as long as possible, because the minute people start jumping, then it becomes, look out for my future, KD. Kyrie could do whatever he wants at any point in time. We all know that. And then the next follow-up is if KD ever, for whatever reason, for his future, decides I'm not going to push through XYZ. The good news with KD, he loves playing basketball. So he will have a pretty high threshold. And that's why I think you were high on him. And I had him as my number 2 player behind Jokic.
Same.
And he's going to just do that. He's just going to crank. They have some interesting players at the back end of their rotation that could be fun. Claxton, Cam Thomas, I think, could jump in. Royce O'Neal, I think, could be like a dark horse for top 50 value in a 9-cat league, because he just sort of doesn't get hurt and they need him, and he just chunks his way along. We see a couple players like that every year. They're kind of boring, though. The Nets.
I know. It's a funny thing
like
to
the
say.
Rockets. Let's talk the Rockets.
All right, Rockets. So we tried to warn everybody that Sengun was going too early. But I don't know how many people listened. It was alluring, man. That was a buzzy name. He has great fantasy lines. There's this guy, if he gets minutes, he can do points and rebounds and assists and steals and blocks, and the percentages were questionable, but
that's actually the most interesting thing is he went 4 for 4 from the foul line.
Yeah.
So, I mean, small sample size theater there, but
is this a here we go again? Like, is he going to get that job at some point this year?
This is a it matters who you listen to conversation. Like, you can't. He should have never had the hype last year that he was getting, based on the existing information at hand, was that there wasn't enough peripheral stats to support high-end fantasy value for a guy that wasn't playing at the time. So you got these buy recommendations all over the place that created a market that never should have existed in the first place. And the key to it was that he couldn't stay on the floor defensively. So that made it even worse than if he had gotten the full load, he would have never hit his mark. Then he can't stay on the floor defensively. And now you're seeing already the evidence of like why they're not going to go all in on him. They're going to let Bruno Fernando come in, who, by the way, has always sort of been on the radar as like, hopefully this guy could get some minutes because the stat set's nice. And, there's some upside there, and he just steps in and they're like, yeah, no, we'll take the guy that gives us something defensively. And, you got a bunch of players in that starting unit that also need the ball in their hands. So they're not going to go like some like Domantas Sabonis style offense where they take the guy who's super versatile and just give him the ball every time and let everybody else die on the vine. They're going to let those other players do their thing. So he'll have sporadic offensive outbursts, and hopefully he will improve on his defense. And if he can play 25, 26 minutes per game, the question then will become, how bad does he take a hit in the steals and blocks area because of, decreased physicality that's going to hit him pretty much earlier than it hits most other big men. And then the question becomes those peripherals. Like, can he hit free throws? If he can't hit those free throws for whatever reason, that was, not ideal, then it's even double bad, triple bad. So I don't know if he'll crack the top 100 this year.
Capella-Okongwu battle. How long before that tips the other direction? Or does it just stay like this most of the year and Okongwu does like pretty well regardless?
All I know is I got, in my last high-stakes league, I got Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, same team. And I love it. And I love it. And why does that matter? Because, like, if Capella goes, he just sits in the paint and grabs rebounds. If he goes, then Murray is going to feast even more. And Okongwu, sometimes he's a rebounding guy, and sometimes he just disappears from the glass. And I kind of think he might cede the glass to somebody like Murray, box out his guy, let Murray grab the ball and go, and they just have this high speed, up-tempo offense. That's great. Okongwu he was better than Capella last year, and we've been fading Capella for a while, and I think that they're going to let Capella sort of, have a long, walk down the plank, and there's really no reason to completely go away from Capella. Just give him eventually 23 minutes per game. They'll have a controversy that, should Okongwu be starting, and Nate McMillan will take forever on it. And it'll be like 2/3 of the year, they'll switch that up at some point in time. And it'll probably be, the guise of an injury. Capella will have an injury, the switch will occur, they'll never go back. And, it'll be Capella off the bench, and, all will be well. Okongwu will be awesome. He was in that clump of players that, you could just almost guarantee you could get after 80, 90, 100. So happy there.
Memphis Grizzlies. We're flying through here. Santi Aldama, huge first actual game, not preseason anymore. We know John Conchar is a big Mike Passador favorite. He got in there. There's a Dylan Brooks element to that, obviously, but Conchar was fantastic. Brandon Clark wasn't as good, and I'm very pro Clark, and I'm getting people like coming after me right now for saying I think you can still draft him around 100 and you'll be fine. Like, his line last night, as ugly as it was still not that far off a top 100 line. What do you sit with the Grizzlies this year?
Yeah, no. First of all, shouts to Mike Passador, because he knew about Santi last year. And this is why, working in blurbs and doing the blurb work is so important, is, he was able to witness those lines last year and knew coming into this year that Santi was good. So when Santi showed up in the preseason, it wasn't surprising, because and we do have a pretty good Memphis Grizzlies team around here on the journalism side. So they're constantly feeding us intel about how good Santi is. And then you watch him in the preseason and also in the first game, and you're like, yeah, he can cover ground. He's versatile. He's good. He's going to be just fine playing whatever 20 minutes at minimum for them per game until Jaren Jackson comes back. He fits next to Brandon Clark. I think when Jaren Jackson, by the way, playing 5-on-5 was an interesting news report that caused me to snap him up at about 110 in a high stakes draft, thinking that might be sooner rather than later. I think they'll find a way to make Santi, play, probably take Tillman out of the rotation so he can probably get his 20 the rest of the year. So that's why do I say that? If you're getting 20 out of Santi, I'm guessing that's top 150 at best, or probably not at best. I'd say that's top 50 is my prediction, what he would be at 20 minutes per game. He's going to get more than that until then. So that means he's rosterable. And hopefully he continues to develop and things happen in his favor and he can play 25 minutes per game the rest of the way. And I think Brandon Clark can fold right into that and also play 25 minutes per game. And that for Brandon Clark is top 100 value, as you sort of alluded to, even on a bad night. Also,
is there any Clark panic in you? Any Clark panic?
He kind of is what he is as a player. I have a tiny bit due to injury risk because he's never really stayed healthy. But this is a thin Grizzlies squad. You know, they sort of like losing Melton really made it such that Tyus Jones, Conchar was another Panda guy, and another one that we've watched in these games. You're like, that guy could play for a lot of teams. And yes, Dylan Brooks was out. That's going to probably knock the value out of Conchar. It's going to take the Grizzlies back to who they were, you know, sort of originally. But you remove Melton and you don't really replace him. You don't have Jaren Jackson, and yeah, Santi's good, and that's all great.
Slow mo left.
Slow mo's gone. That's a huge piece. It's so they're thin, and these guys are going to end up chucking, you know, the John Morants, the Desmond Baines, and so Brandon Clark, where does he fit? He was a key guy during their playoff run. Like they relied on him, and he's a player that's going to give them offense inside the paint, vertically. There's not a lot of players on the team that can do that. Another thing that helps him is what's his name? What's our bouncy 20-year-old that's he's hurt.
I
right
haven't
now.
a clue.
He's good. He's 6'10".
Grizzlies?
Yeah, he's 6'10". He's a young kid. I literally had one coffee today, and I'm tired, Dan.
Are we talking about who we started with?
No, we're talking about who is the backup power forward for the Memphis Grizzlies, whose name I can't remember.
Oh, I don't even know. Who is their backup forward right now?
I'm going to find out because I'm, you know, drawn.
I think he's their backup. I think Clark is the backup power forward right now.
No, if I get this before you, you're in trouble because I've obviously forgotten his name.
Yeah, I don't know who you're talking. Is this someone that's like played before today?
Oh yeah, Zaire Williams. Boom.
Oh, yeah.
He's having He's having a weird injury issue right now with his knee, and it's like, is it a thing, or are they just being super cautious because it's the first or second game of the season? So like that's just a little tiny piece of information that makes me feel better about Brandon Clark. And overall, though, just his skill and what he brings to the table, I think that 20 minutes will be the floor, 25 will be the max. And I kind of lean toward him getting the max with Jaren Jackson out so long. And if Zaire Williams, who now I remember his name, if he is having trouble, and he's good, by the way, I actually like his what he's done with his game. I think he's still a little green in the sense that can't quite be counted on to do the right thing. So I think they'll bring him along a little slowly. But Brandon Clark is going to be just fine. Top 100 with top 60 overall upside, especially in 9-cat leagues.
You mentioned Nick Richards earlier in the show. He got 21 and change minutes in their blowout win. Some of that may have actually been blowout related. For me, he's more of a watch list kind of guy. Are you making the move quickly on him?
No, I think Clifford is playing some games here because Mark Williams is, I think, who the locals are behind. And
right,
yeah, he's rookie, and he's kind of obviously what he is. He's going to be a little bit slow on rotation, super explosive, and coach is going to use Nick Richards essentially to motivate Mark Williams, and also use Plumlee to motivate Williams. And it's just a question of when do they get tired of all that? And now Clifford's not a guy that's going to roll over, sort of a veteran coach. You got this tank race. I could see Charlotte being like the eighth place tank team. So they probably don't think very much of their chances to be picked number 1 overall in the lottery. So they take a little while with it. But Plumlee's not a spring chicken. He's probably going to get hurt at some point, and then you're going to see both Nick Richards and Mark Williams. And in drafts where I got hung out to dry on centers, and I was just kind of like, all right, well, it's just going to suck at that position, just be good everywhere else. I would take the two of them together and see which one shook out and get rid of the one that didn't. And that's probably going to end up being Mark Williams. Nick Richards, flyer, there's been enough hype from both Clifford and locally about Nick Richards to not just dismiss this as blowout related, fluke related. I would think that he's probably going to be discussed in fantasy circles for the next 2 weeks at least.
Spurs. I want to do a little Spurs, and then I want to get to like one or two strategy questions, and then we'll have to peel this thing off. I really should have warned folks. We don't typically do the questions that are like, should I pick up so and so and drop so and so? We want to go broad, and a few of you guys did drop in some really good broad questions, so I want to make sure we get to those. But quickly on the Spurs, yeah, I was obviously very happy. I have Keldon Johnson on almost every single fantasy team. It surprises a lot of people because he's not an old man. I just thought that like we saw him going at a top 45 clip at the end of last year when DeJounte Murray was still there. And there was sort of like very little to hold him back other than being on a really terrible team. So yeah, I have a young guy on my teams. Everybody get over it. Other than Johnson, it was a clunky day for San Antonio. Trey Jones, who ended up with a ton of hype coming into drafts, had 14 and 2 assists. He did block 2 shots, so kind of saved his line with that fluky stat. And then Devin Vassell actually led the team in usage, but could not throw a pebble in the ocean in yesterday's game. You know, at a glance, it feels like Vassell is someone you should be targeting with a bye after a horrible game like that, where he still got to do everything. Jones, on the other hand, I was kind of fading him getting as high as he was going in drafts. He felt like more of like your 9th, 10th round, more flyery type. And then by the end of draft season, he was going late 7, early 8th round, where like those are guys you still can take established dudes in that spot. What do you think goes on in San Antonio here? Are you agreed? You disagree?
Jones was who you faded, and he was going early.
Yeah, once he jumped up the board 40 slots, I just couldn't get on board with that one.
People got excited, I think. And what was strange about that is Primo, to me, is the one that, you know, like if you're just looking for overall pop, like, and what if factor, Primo to me is the one that where you could, you know, you just don't know. It's like a big old question mark. Could he put it together statistically? And then it seems pretty damn likely that he would cut into Trey Jones. So I get where you're coming from. There was a couple of times where I was hoping Jones would be available in drafts for those late assists, and not only does he not deliver them in game one, he wasn't available late in drafts. So because people just started, and you're right, it happened about a week, you know, T-7 to 14 days. It felt like he started flying up the draft board. Vassell, I think that you're going to definitely have an opportunity here, because not only were people not really schooled on him last year, and they didn't even know he was good when he was good. So he comes into this year, he gets a little overhyped by the fantasy community sort of early, that steals his margin. And then I started noticing Vassell dropping something to like 65, 70 in 8-cat leagues, maybe 60. And really his value was sort of in that 50 to 55 range. I can't remember off the top of my head where I had him, but like, so he actually became undervalued at the end of draft season. And now a game like this, and people are like, why did I get this guy? Like, he wasn't even good last year. And now look at him. He's not even starting off good this year. And, you know, 15 shots is not as much as some people might think, you know, he could be getting as quote unquote a lead guy. So it's like everything's lining up there.
A lot though. 15's a pretty big
and
number.
Especially for him. You know, that's a good number for him. It's not, you know, I think he can do a little more, but they got nowhere else to go. And that kind of speaks to the strength of your Keldon Johnson pick. Is when it comes to like they need a bucket, he's the guy, and he looks great. And there's one other piece of hidden value with him. I didn't notice he went 1 of 2 from the foul line. If he figures it out from the foul line, additional value. You know, he could be that top 50. You know, and stay healthy. You can make a case he could finish top 40 if he adds 5, 6, 7% to his free throw shooting. So where I fell in the trap where I didn't get much Keldon Johnson is I had top 50 that I like projected to finish top 50 players available all the time. And so like there's this group of top 50 to 90 guys that I would love to have on my team, but it was just impossible. You know, you got Isaiah Hartenstein sitting there staring at you, and you're like, well, you know, he's better than Mitchell Robinson. He plays like a Tibbs guy. That was just one example.
We have 2. I want to do 2 roughly strategic questions here, more broad. And before I ask you those, I want to remind everybody, because we're mid-show now, please do hit the like button on this thing. I probably should have said this earlier. I'm not that great with video. I'm much better with audio. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Brew and I are doing this every Thursday, all season long. It's like the good old days, man. Dan and Brew back together on this thing. Brew is svelte. I have kids that are in preschool, so I have like 2 to 3 hours in the morning where this place is quiet. There's nobody in that direction right now. Not a soul. There's a dog somewhere.
Isn't it great? Isn't it awesome?
God, just sweet, sweet peace and solitude. And so I can put on fun shirts and turn on this camera and we can do a show. Question about rostering multiple players from the same team. I wanted to start with this one because you talked about how you have a boatload of Atlanta Hawks. You had Trey very high. You had Murray crazy high this year. You had Okongwu very high this season. I'm guessing you have all three of those guys, or at least two of the three on a lot of your teams. So Brenda says, I drafted 3 Grizz. Is 3 from the same team too many?
No, I mean, think about it this way. If one of them goes down, your other player is going to get the usage, in some way, shape, or form. I love it. The only downside is if you drafted like 3 players from a bad team, like a bad organization that can't figure things out, and it hit all 3 of them. So maybe that's a consideration. When I looked at Atlanta, it was like, well, they're not going to go away from Trae Young. They just dealt their future away for DeJounte Murray. Kong was clearly better than Capella. There'd be no reason I would fade that situation.
Right.
The Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson draft I just did, eventually Jaren Jackson will be great, and maybe Brandon Clark won't be good, and I'll move another direction. So like I did in that case, draft those 2 guys, which was highly specific.
A lot. I did that with the Jazz a ton. I got Mike Conley at like 130 in every single draft I'm in. I'm just like, great, I'm gonna get 2 awesome months. I'm gonna get 2 awesome months out of this dude at a top 75 clip, and then bye-bye. But like that's if you can get that at 130 in a draft, that's like almost a guarantee. Well,
I got like Kyle Lowry at like 130 or something.
Yeah. He was horrible yesterday, and people are gonna freak out. He'll be fine.
Well, he's not in. I didn't watch the game, but I can guarantee you he's not in shape. Like first week of the season.
Although wasn't there like a big thing about him not being Big Booty Kyle this year? So I actually didn't watch that game either because I didn't have many questions.
Yeah, they did that story about every player in the league.
Everybody's booty 15 pounds of muscle. Josh
they
King,
went on the brew diet.
Fantasy player. Good question. Sample size. When do you? We got to do this every year, by the way. This is an important question we do answer on this show once per season. How long do you wait before you believe what you're seeing from a sample size standpoint? And I feel like if I remember, you said it's in the 4 to 6 week range.
It just depends. It's like 5 to 15 games. So 15 games, it kind of is what it is, whatever it's going to be.
That's about 4 weeks-ish, right?
Yeah. Yeah. About
3 and change.
And then you can extend it out. It just like there could be, if the situation is really dynamic, meaning like there's like a reason you understand the reason and it is what it is, and then it's going to drag this thing out. So maybe say 20 games. I get it. That stuff happens. But really, like when I'm like looking like, do I want to see what this player is capable of? I'm gonna watch this player for 5 games. At the 5th game, I know like, did he lose explosion? Did he have a bad summer? Did he gain explosion? Did he work on a skill? Did that, whatever that question is, honestly, it takes probably 1 or 2 games. I always want to give a little bit of like 1 or 2 games at minimum, just for the idea that like sometimes it is very much understood, players, staff, trainers, that these guys are not coming into game 1 in shape. They're coming in at 70% with the purpose of elongating their, or preserving themselves for the long haul of the season. They're going to give up those 5 games early on to be better down the stretch. So how that manifests across an entire team, that can have ramifications. You can have a number 1 or 2 player from that team that's doing one of those things and quite literally deferring everything to other guys. And then when they get their win back, they go, okay, now it's my turn. And it changes everything. And all of a sudden the entire box score switches. So 5 games, that stuff stops happening. And then you can see for a player that's got no weird thing hanging over their head, no like injury issue, no coaching issue, no nothing, just like a run of the mill after 5 games, what that player is all about.
I think this is a pretty good segue into our last strategy question. So this is it's built on the same premise you just talked about, but geared more towards your actual team. How long do you look at your own team before understanding what that build is accomplishing? And I think this is different for head-to-head and roto, although I guess timing-wise, it's probably about the same, but what you do about it is probably different head-to-head versus roto, because in head-to-head, you generally lean into the strengths a little bit more, and in roto, you try to lean into the weakness a little bit more in whatever you can make up the most ground. So how long do you assess your team before you start making adjustments? For me, it's in the 2 to 3 week range. I try not to stream, actually, in head-to-head leagues for the first 1 to 2 weeks, just to get a feel for what everybody is and what the team is, because sometimes you might end up dropping a player that's a better fit for your team than the guy you're picking up.
I think over the years, I've been getting just more fine-tuned with knowing, like, if player X is not what I thought they were going to be, what does that do to my team? You might find that, like, all of your bigs just weren't what you thought they were going to be, and it just has this profound impact on your field goal percentage. Because all of a sudden, these players that you would have been relying on, they're not either in your lineup or whatever the case may be, and you find yourself down at the bottom of the standings in that category, and you're like, I didn't expect that. I expected to be at the top of the standings in that category, and I predicated my strategy on it. So what do I do? And the answer to that might be, I might get aggressive with early waiver wire pickups that are bigs in order to combat that. I might fade somebody who's going to drag me down in that category. So being very kind of just on top of it when knowing what your potential weaknesses could be. So identify your potential weaknesses in the first couple of weeks, but mostly, like you said, you're not trying to act on that stuff, early on in week 1 or 2, and it'll always be case specific. That's what we're here for. Ask a question, we'll tell you what do we think? Is this, fact or fiction that this player is either going to continue or not continue, or whatever the case may be. But you gotta stay the course. There's just too many examples of, we used the Nikola Jokic example the other day. Yeah, people wanted to drop him. People were being told to drop him, what is it, 4 or 5 years ago. And then he just popped off with whatever top 20 season the rest of the way. And then became the Nikola Jokic that we know. So the first third of the season can be like that. What separates the winners from the losers at the end of the day is who can get off at the right time and who can get on at the right time.
Want to give a shout out here to our buddies over at Thrive Fantasy as we approach the end of our live show. Go to thrivefantasy.com or download the Thrive Fantasy app and use promo code ETHOS to get a deposit match up to $250. That is the biggest promo that they run with any of their partners all year long, and they've given it to us here at Sports Ethos. Again, that promo code is ETHOS at thrivefantasy.com. Go join their guaranteed prize contest. It's fun because it's prop bets. I suck at DFS. And I said this on yesterday's show. I actually kind of hate DFS a little bit. I'm really sorry. Sorry, DFS players. But I like prop bets because I'm a sports bettor and a fantasy player. So check out our buddies at thrivefantasy.com. A promo code, once again, is Ethos. Brew, this has been a blast. The noon bell ringeth. I have to go pick up a child at preschool, and we'll do it again next week, won't we?
Indeed, sir. Looking forward to it. And thank you to all of you for coming along for the ride.
Yeah, thank you to all of our live viewers. I think this might be the biggest Dan Brew show we've had. I don't know. It doesn't matter. And to the podcast listeners, thank you all for listening to this show a little bit later in the day as well. Coming up on tomorrow's episode of Fantasy NBA Today, which will not be live, I'll be going through all the biggest stories of the week. Ads, drops, holds, streams, and a look towards our first NBA weekend of the 2022-2023 season. Big thank you as well to ExpressVPN and Manscaped.com. I'll tell you more about those guys on tomorrow's show. For Aaron Bruski, at Aaron Bruski on Twitter, at Dan Besbris on Twitter. The video, folks, you can see it on your screen. I should probably take this question off the YouTube stream. I'm going to go back. There's those handles. Also wanted to mention we are recruiting here at Sports Ethos. You can hit either of us up on Twitter if you'd like to be a part of the madness, at Dan Besbris, at Aaron Bruski, or email roster@sportsethos.com. Have a great Thursday, short card tonight. I think we all need a deep breath, don't we? Talk to you tomorrow, everybody. So long.